So STAC stands for A to Z technology, and this is our effort to basically integrate it and index all the resources of BD2K. And we categorize the resources into 4 big categories. The first one would be all the digital product actual outcome of the NIH BD2K initiative, all the effort, all the way from the center, the 11 centers, and including the centers and the data discovery index program, and the training program, and all other relevant activities sponsored by NIH. And the second big category is, actually this is very big, is the scientific literature that we hope to incorporate. As you can see that our goal, ultimate goal, is to minimize the burden to the developer, the end user. And so that we don't want to really completely rely on the author of the resources to keep their tool updated, to register their tool to our registrar and to keep the update. So we want to develop automated method so that we could systematically parse the scientific literature to discover new softwares, new tools, new APIs, new databases, new web services, and actually also discover and maintain the metadata associated with that in a way that is discoverable and interoperable. So this is one of the to-do items in our list. And the third category would be the author submissions. So that could be done in 2 ways, either by initiated by the author, or we could, if we know that some exciting tool is new tool going to be developed, we could initiate the invitation to the developer. So to make sure that is included in STAC. And what we are actually currently focusing on as the initial phase would be this last category. So what we're doing is that we have identified 20 to 30, somewhere between 20 to 30 also available, currently available, publicly available resource repositories for this kind of tools and softwares and databases. And we already started the process of incorporating them into STAC. And so far, I would say that we have processed about 4.5 of them. So far, we have Galaxy, BioJS, BioConductors, and BioCatalog, Elixir, I think, if I count, like 4 or 5. So we're in the process of doing that. So now the question is that what kind of metadata we need for the resources that we're indexing. So this table, I do not intend to have you to read through this table, but just to give you an overview picture about what are the fields that we keep. This is actually it's a subset of the field that we keep, and the type of each field, and whether it's mandatory or not. And there are some example values that we have. As you can see that, actually this is one discussion point we would like to bring up would be the indexing method for the resources. Currently, we're proposing to use DOI as the index, but we welcome input and suggestions on this. And as you can be able to see that we also have a metadata associated with the author, developer, and the place where the paper is published, and the code repository where you can access the code, and as well as the metadata associated with the resource itself, such as the input-output format, upstream, downstream tools in the same pipeline, and the biological domains, and the release, the platform this tool is implemented, and so on and so forth.
Just everything about it, the name part,
so,
the sign.
Coming back to the
so cool.
indexing method, so as I mentioned that we're going to use DOI as index tools, and some of the existing softwares already have DOI, then we are going to adopt that. If they do not already have, we're going to have some new DOI. Uniquely index each resources we're incorporating. And we're also proposing to actually align this metadata we are collecting and generating with the ontology, so that we can associate semantics with the resources we have. So we're proposing to use the EDAM ontology for this purpose. Again, so if you have good feedback and suggestions, input for this, we are very likely to incorporate that.
Find one that has perfect ledges all
so this is the overall architecture of SBAC. Here are the 4 different main resources: the BD2K effort, the PubMed, the scientific literature, and the author initiated or SBAC invited submission by the authors. And this is our currently ongoing work, which is incorporating all the existing repository. And here's a little bit of detail, like we're going to put everything in the JSON format, and we're using RESTful APIs, and also on this would be the backend we're using, the database, the visualization software, and the platform.
They're not that friendly.
So here are the list of technology terms. This is the list of things we're currently using from the backend database and the web services. And we decided to use MySQL to basically as to store the structured schema to preserve the data integrity. And also we use Solar, extension of Apache using to basically doing indexing and enable scalable search. And we're using MongoDB, which help us to store the statistics and the search statistics and the history of the search. And we are using Neo4j to illustrate the workflow among the software trees. And we're going to port it to deport it to Amazon Cloud. And for tomorrow morning's demo, we're still running it on the local server. We hope to collect some feedback so that we can incorporate the feedback and have an official alpha version release on Amazon. Okay. For the front-end interface, as I mentioned, we're going to make this REST API, and also we're going to use D3 for all the statistical visualizations on the and in general, we're going to use the Node.js and the MVC design patterns to guide our development. Okay, so this is a snapshot of the front page. Actually, you'll see that this, if you go to asdac.bio, and you'll be able to see, if you scroll down the front page, there will be the bottom half of the page, showing you the top ranked resources and the statistics we have so far. And in this case, actually, as of yesterday, we have indexed more than 5,000 tools already. And this part would be actually, it's a dynamic part, is a scrolling window that show you some of the highlight of the recent new development that were incorporated. And over here, we basically, they're showing some statistics. They're showing that what are the different platforms and the distribution of that. And we have already a few thousand tags used to annotate the tools. And also, this is also statistics of showing that what are the 5 repositories that we have already successfully incorporated, and basically a proportion of the number of tools they have on each repository. So that's what the front page. And at the top of the page, you would be able to see a search bar, very much like a Google search. Okay, and then you type in a keyword. In this case, I'm just grabbing the screenshot. Let's see. I'm going to use SIG, like because we're doing a lot of sequencing. But many tools name have the keyword SIG, right? So let's see what we have. We just type in SIG over here. And then this would be the result page, actually this first page of that. And here, there's 3 columns here. And the leftmost column basically would be actually categories of the result. Like there we have a text categories of like the database and widgets and others. And also, apologize for the low resolution here. Here are the sources. Where are the which repository we actually acquired the data, the metadata. And here would be the platform, right? Of the basically showing that which type of the platform and how many tools on that platform. That's actually in the result of the query. And also these are the type of the resources. And here is the list. And actually you can see here's the total number. And on the right side, what we incorporate will be the search, what we call search history. Basically, and instead of just doing one query, abstract allow you to further refine your search, because it's often the case we have some vague idea what we want to have, and then we type in some keywords, and then we realize that that's too generic, right? So if give us 20, in this case it's 173 back, and then maybe there's too many to go through. Let's say, well, let me refine it. And here, what I could do is like you can click the advanced button, and then there's a type called to do either filtered query. We're going to demonstrate that tomorrow morning, or sub search. By doing sub search, you add that we think are important to the search. In this case, I'm going to add RNA because I know I'm interested in RNA, so not DNA in this case. And then, of course, you can see on this side, this history is going to be kept. Okay. And the result again is updated. This is the end, seq and RNA. Okay. Then all the statistics categorization are going to be updated. And then if let's see if this 107 is still too many, and then I'm going to see, but then I remember actually maybe I saw this one from Galaxy, or from in this case, I'm going to show you that maybe I saw this from author directly deposit, right? So I'm going to click among these sources. There's one item here called user submission, and then I can click that, and then this is very effective in cutting down the size. Now I only have 2, right? Again, this refinement is also showing up here, okay? And then I said, well, maybe the one I'm looking for is top hat 2, okay, for the RNA sequencing alignment, for example. Then I can click on that. After I click on that, this would you see as a page. You can see all the metadata. Well, you don't see the actual content, but you see what category we're providing. Okay, and if let's see if I'm interested in the description, learn more, and then if you just click the description, it will give you the description, and then also you can click the link, which gives you the source code, and which gives you some documentation, right? So, and then the homepage of the developer's homepage. And also it gives you, for example, DOI, if you're interested in knowing what the DOI is associated with that. And you also notice actually on the right panel, this is it's all labeled as coming soon. It's because that's what we envision would be very helpful for the community. The user community would be like where I would propose to suggest that the workflow chart. So basically, what workflow pipelines, analytics pipeline, Top Hat 2 is part of.
Absolutely.
We are going to give you this graphical diagram, showing you that okay, this is actually. You can run this right after you run the bow tie, and then right before you after. Before you run it. This is the whole pipeline for RNA sequencing. And then here we're going to give you suggestions about the reference data set. What data set you could use to run this? Okay, and then it will come through. Right, we'll give you example data set, and also we're going to suggest alternative tools. Right. Maybe you say, well, after I read this, I'm not quite sure Top Hat 2 is the best one that I want to try first. But then I could look at maybe the selfish is one of the alternative approach. Then I could click on this in the future. This is going to be automatically generated. So search for similar tools.
Straight up.
Okay.
Major state park scene, and businessmen could even go there and have their lunch.
So we have 2 posters for this. One is the backend design, and one is the front-end design and the user interface. If you haven't visited our poster, I would invite you to do so. And also tomorrow morning, we will have a live demo. Tomorrow morning, I think it's 8 o'clock right here. And we're going to demonstrate the basic functionalities and also the future plan we envisioned. Of course, I cannot do this myself, right? The UCLA team is closely collaborating with each other, especially for this past summer. And we won't be able to have this stack without this group of young talent. So literally work day and night to make this happen, right? So we are doing the final tune-up even this morning, right before the site visit, to make sure the color shows well. So for tomorrow morning. And also, we won't be able to, accomplish this ambitious goal without collaborating with other institutes. These are the list of the groups that we either already established connection or are going to establish connection very soon. Especially the very last one, I think Alex is going to mention that we're proposing to have a resource working group, and that's actually we will invite advice and input from the community so that to guide our development. So this is a very exciting opportunity for us to work with many colleagues at UCLA and also across the nation. So thank you for listening to my talk. Any questions? Yeah.
Hey, it's very nice. I do have a question. I noticed that some of the tools might have licensing issues. How are you getting around that particular issue if a particular tool has particular licensing issues with it?
So we do keep track of that information in our metadata, whether it's what kind of license they have, right? Whether it's a free, completely free, or it's free to maybe academic word, or it's it's actually not free at all, right? So I really have to license, and we provide that information, and we also, you can see, we provide the link to the original the website of the tool, and also the contact information of the correspondence, the author of that, so that they could handle that, because we won't be able to handle them on their behalf. But what we do instead is to provide this information and to facilitate the communication.
So in your concept of the workflow space, those licensed tools wouldn't particularly be able to be used in that situation.
It won't be able to use it right away, but at least the user would be able to know that's available, and then once they negotiate the license, they will be able to use it. Yeah.
The resource directory, I think, as we said, we envision the first challenge it addresses is fundable. You will find it. Whether or not it's available for immediate use, there's a policy issue. I think we discussed this thing for probably day and night for at least several days in a row. It's the best way is we identify the source for the users, then they would go to the original place and apply for application agreement to use the tools.
So this is great, thanks very much. And maybe this is something we can look at more tomorrow during the demo, but I was just curious, when you conduct a search, when you get your results back, there's all this metadata and information about the tools. And so how do you sustain, or any thoughts on how you plan on sustaining that information over the course of the life of that tool that various people are developing?
That's an excellent question. As you can see, this is a very young project. We literally started this past summer, and we have already thought about that, and we have a discussion, many discussions among ourselves. So what we hope to do is to develop automated tools. There's a multiple part. One part would be like going to the PubMed, or a European version of that, to basically parse the recent literatures, the new papers, to see whether there's a new version or different version, alternative to that, and to derive, to basically capture the metadata. And another one is like we want to write web crawler to go to publicly accessible, maybe developers' websites like the PI's group website, to basically try to keep track of, see whether there's a new release, there's an update, there's an additional document, or there may be like bug fix, right? We want to make this as automated as possible to minimize the effort of human curation. Of course, we cannot completely replace that. And for doing that, that's why actually we want to collaborate with Professor Han from UIUC, and we also have a local expertise, such as Professor Carlos Zaniro sitting in the back, because he didn't have an opportunity to give the official talk, but we already heard a little bit from William Chu's talk this morning that he already developed generic, actually very powerful text mining tools to basically extract the semantics from a large amount of web pages. So we're going to leverage that expertise for this effort.
Just a quick follow-up. So that's great. Any thoughts on engaging the community itself or the tool contributors to kind of proactively interact or collaborate to contribute to that?
So another excellent question. So we here's what we plan to do, and would be like to basically engage all the investigators, because we have one category of the tools we're going to cover with what we call the author submission, right? Either by initiated by the author, or if they don't initiate that, we invite them to submit. That's one way. Another way would be like, because we propose them to have this resource working group. So the members of the working group, we plan to invite all the important representatives from the community, so that we want to hear from them. So we definitely want to incorporate any suggestion and input that are going to make this better.
One interesting test case probably to think about following the history of a tool would be what happened this year, where probably some 30 to 70% of all tools have been moved, or of all open source tools have been moved from Google Code to GitHub also. Yeah. And I think this is a nice test case to think about how to manage these things.
Yeah.
But I've also one more technical comment. You mentioned DOIs for tool identification, and there's a lot of discussion on DOIs for data set or data identification. And one of the things we have at least come up against frequently is that DOIs imply stability. So for data that kind of works, at least, and actually this is in this discussion, we try to distinguish between fixed data, let's say a proteomics experiment which has been done once, which is submitted, and then the data remains unchanged. There might be minor changes, a metadata update or so, but basically it remains unchanged. And then there is things which are more like a UniProt record also, which is by definition dynamic and changes all the time through updates. And I think tools are probably much more in the second category of something which is likely to be frequently updated or even frequently to die and to become completely irrelevant, which is probably less the case for specific data sets. So I think there needs to be a concept of how to unite this with a basic requirement of DOIs, which at least in theory say something should be there, remain stable.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, Henning, you brought up a very important question. This is about how do you create the identifier and how the identifier is sustainable. I think we've spent weeks to talk about this specific question. In the United States, there's two very well-known identifier systems. One is, the example of it is social security number or driver's license. Every single individual gets one, and that thing stays with you the moment you are born to the moment you die, or the moment you know how to drive to the moment you can't drive anymore. And the other identifier system is cell phones. You could have multiple numbers assigned to the same individual or same institution or laboratory group. There isn't really lifespan, it's just for functionality you could use it. So we kind of contemplated and debate this back and forth. One way is to have dual identifiers. We use a DOI to identify the two with the Aztec abbreviation of AZ, as we are working it out with the California Digital Library System. The beautiful thing about it is we paid nothing. UCLA has umbrella lessons, everything's covered. We could afford to assign one tool with multiple DOIs at zero cost. The second is also parallel create an internal ASCAP identifier system, like the Social Security system, that's one-on-one until it goes away. Now, this is, as Wei said, it's debatable, and there's some discussion in the poster, ASCAP 2 in the hallway that we could talk about at this moment. It's a prototype. There's no definitive strategies made, but a lot of discussion happening.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, is there a new publication that weren't a second DOI issued to the same tool, or has the tool been transformed substantially enough or deviated that actually necessitates a second DOI? The good thing is we don't have the financial burden. We could afford to assign them.
Yeah. So I think Pepe made a great point. Just think of currently we're taking the internal ID inside ASTAC as the social security number that we keep private, and then the DOI as the public ID, like a phone number that everybody can use it to search it and search against other database. So of course, we keep the internal mapping between these two IDs so that the user would not be bothered by, the evolution of the development of the tool. That's our current approach. But of course, we're welcome suggestions how to improve this current scheme. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so with respect to the Coordination Center, one of the other aspects that the Coordination Center is tasked with is supporting and organizing the working groups that are anticipated as part of BD2K. And so essentially we see several different roles for the Coordination Center, and for those of you who are on the call on Tuesday, you've seen these slides before, but I'll elaborate a little bit more in this discussion. Certainly, one of the key things that we will be doing is maintaining online collaboration spaces for the different working groups that we anticipate. This entails creation of the websites for online presence. And actually, as of yesterday, we just had a discussion with the metadata working group that's led by Mark Musen. And one of the key things that they've emphasized is this need for content management systems. So being able to actually have a content management system, whether it's something like Drupal or WordPress or the such, but to also make it more dynamic. So they want to be able to have functionality in terms of, for instance, real-time document collaboration and being able to work on presentations or other things that will support the working group and the interaction of the members of that team. So that obviously is sort of an initial set of requirements that are being set out by the working groups. And as new working groups are created, obviously this will also be enhanced. New functionality for these online websites will be created. The second thing that obviously the working groups will need to be doing is coordinating the meetings. And depending on the working group and the nature of the working group, how it's run, these meetings may be monthly, they may be every 2 weeks. It's really going to be up to how the leadership of that working group wants to run itself. What I will say is that the Coordination Center will be on all of those calls in order to support the working group. Will be responsible for things like taking the minutes. So that sort of relieves the burden of dealing with sort of the administrative tasks from the working groups and their leadership to the Coordination Center. And that helps actually facilitate the third point, which is discussion and linkage across other NIH and BD2K initiatives. So one of the things, as we have internally discussed this, is we don't want the working groups to be silos. We want the working groups to actually know about what the other working groups and what other initiatives from NIH or otherwise may be going on. So they actually have input, and we see that the Coordination Center can actually provide that input potentially. Finally, we want the working groups to have a mission. We want them to have a charge, and we want them to actually achieve their objectives. So the question we're putting to the working groups as they start out is, what do you want as your end deliverables? What are the end products for this working group, whether it's a white paper, a policy statement, a set of resources, whatever it might be, and what is the timeline you anticipate for that working group to achieve that? Obviously, that's sort of a bit of a moving target, but the Coordination Center will work with each of the working groups that are developed in order to achieve those. So just to give you some example of the working groups that we are anticipating, as I mentioned already, we've already had an initial discussion with the metadata working group out of Stanford, and they're responsible for the developing annotation standards and the associated tools for describing the big data. We anticipate other types of working groups too. So this is actually what Wei was referring to, which was the resource working group, which we hope to have members from the BD2K community discuss what they need in terms of indexing of their resources and what other resources should be indexed. But hearing, of course, that NIH also is going to have a resource working group, maybe there's overlap there and we can actually merge those or combine them somehow so there's synergy between the two. A third working group would be on the EHR, so the electronic health record. Obviously developing shared standards for representing and working with EHR data. Several centers of excellence focus on this. And this is sort of a moving target that it would be good to have a working group on. The API working group is basically proposing standards for application program interfaces to the BD2K tools, as well as baseline methods for documentation and code sharing. And then another one that we are proposing to launch is the consortium working group. So in many cases, several BD2K awardees or centers of excellence may want to get together and create certain shared activities. It may not span the entire BD2K community, but it may span several different components. And so what we would like to be able to do is have a working group that actually is a forum for this discussion and where members can actually pitch ideas, develop those ideas, and move forward with them. The working groups are not meant to be, we're just launching 5 and that's it. The idea is that we will start with 5. These are the key ones that we think are needed, but there will be future working groups. So we anticipate that as the Coordination Center moves along and the working groups progress, some of the working groups will achieve their goals and they will no longer need to meet, in which case new working groups can certainly be spun up. Different ideas for working groups that have come up. One is in precision medicine, and this would certainly be synergistic with upcoming precision medicine initiatives on a national scale, and obviously the large degree of interest in precision medicine. And a second one that's also very timely is in crowdsourcing and citizen science. And actually there is a meeting directly after this BD2K meeting tomorrow regarding crowdsourcing, and I think a working group in that area would actually be useful. Okay, so in terms of getting the working groups formed, the first thing we wanted to do was get an endorsement of what should be the first 5 working groups. We've certainly discussed this initially with NIH. We are going to also have a dialogue with the rest of the BD2K community to make sure that they feel comfortable with this, and whether there are any issues in terms of they say, well, we need actually a working group in this particular topic and that's not covered, to reach out to the BD2K community in order to create consensus about what the initial set of working groups should be. We will then identify the leadership for each of the working groups, and we will work with NIH in that capacity to identify who they feel should be leading the working groups. And once that's established, then we will actually solicit membership from all of the BD2K awardees. So not just the centers of excellence, but also the other BD2K projects that are funded by NIH, and invite participation. If people are interested in the working group, they should have a member be a part of that working group. And then once we have our membership list, we will then convene our first teleconference meetings and initiate the plans for the working groups. So it's relatively straightforward in terms of the organization, and I would certainly welcome any input from NIH if you feel that there are particular working groups that need to be created. or how the working groups may be run. I know that when we had our discussion 2 days ago, one of the issues that was brought up was would the consortium working group also, for instance, address training? And that would be certainly one thing that they could do. So with that, are there any questions?
Thank you. Nice presentation. On your slide there, you had, I'm going to use the word facilitation of working groups. And I'm wondering how active you see that being. I'm not going to suggest whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I have mixed feelings about it when you have the facilitators come in and say, yeah, goals need to be smart, right? And, those kinds of approaches. What are your thoughts about the role and the level of activity that the coordination center plays in that? In getting, obviously, most of the work is going to come from the working group, but there's the sense of facilitating them together. How do you see that working?
So it can be a slippery slope, because I think the role of the coordination center is certainly not to direct these working groups. And it's really going to be up to the leadership of each working group as to how they want it to run and what they want the coordination center to do. We will offer services, and to whatever extent they want us to facilitate the discussions, we will. But for instance, when I was discussing this with Stanford yesterday with metadata working group, they actually brought up the same question. What do you mean by facilitate? And we'll basically be silent on the calls unless we are actually asked to opine. Or if we generate, for instance, the meeting minutes and we think there's points of synergy that the leadership should be aware of, we will make them aware of that. If they want us to have a more active role, we would certainly be happy to do that. But we want the working groups to run independent of us, in the sense that they have intellectual direction on their own. We don't want to be the ones directing it per se.
I think there's definitely a beneficial role that this can have. And having mentioned Stanford, Michel Dumontier at the standards workshop that was held, BD2K standards workshop that was held earlier this year, made the point about the value of having, I'm going to use the word project manager types, who are not involved in the work, who are actually holding people to deadlines and saying, we're going to produce these things by particular dates. And he was recognizing, I guess, almost the sort of alter ego that he felt he needed on many of his projects in order for that project to be effective. And I think that that's possibly, there are shoes for the coordination center to step into there.
Right. So I think that the term project manager is sort of a good analogy here, because one of the things we want to make sure is that the working groups don't sort of lag because they don't have the support they need to do things, but they're aware and they're responsible to what their mission is, what their charge is. And so keeping them honest in terms of, well, you guys said you would have this timeline of getting things done. We're there to help you get that done, but you need to do the work. So I think it is we're going to have to test the waters out with each of the working groups, because I think each working group will also have different personalities in terms of how they want to run. But certainly the end goal for the coordination center would be to make sure that they do hit their deliverables.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this, that the coordination center could actually facilitate in a nice way to cross-pollinate outcomes from one working group with that of the other. So I think that's definitely value there. But what I was curious about is what system have you chosen or decided, if at all, for these online collaboration spaces? Because that could, help,
So we have, no, we haven't chosen one yet. We wanted to actually run this initially through the metadata working group, because they are already up and running, or at least formed. So they already have some ideas about what they would want. So actually, our initial discussion with them yesterday has sort of led, we will have actually a technical call with them next week in order to determine platforms. We have certain platforms that we're familiar with at UCLA. The lead person at the metadata working group who I talked with, for instance, has a large familiarity with Drupal and its possibilities, but he's not necessarily sold or fixed on that. So it will be an open discussion. We are not going to advocate necessarily strongly for any given technology. We want the technology to work for the working group. So. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So I think, Henning, you're next.
Good afternoon. Welcome again. When I've been asked to talk about the integration of the coordination center with the NIH Commons framework, I was a bit worried what to talk about, what to say, because integration between a project which has just started, the coordination center, and the Commons framework, where most of what I find in terms of documentation is, it will be, this is the plan, this is the outline, is quite a challenge. And so I decided to call... That's okay, I am just being honest. So I'm German, I'm honest and direct, and sometimes I step into some... So I decided to call this an impromptu Q&A session, given that we have the NIH officers here and online. But I also thought not to be too formal about the topic. And coming from a nice traditional British town, for me, the Commons is the sort of common grazing land where in the old days people in a coordinated manner could put their cattle on for free for grazing. And I believe, having read through the Commons material on the NIH server, that at least Phil is very well aware of this origin of the term. But this is really Midsummer Common in Cambridge. So, and it's still used nowadays for grazing cattle on there, which sometimes is a bit surprising for tourists. But really, the key point where the connection comes is the Commons belongs to and affects the whole research community. And this citation is from Phil Bourne's blog, which introduced the concept. And this is really, I think, a key anchoring point. So going back a bit to what is the Commons, again, everything I'm using is from the web accessible documentation. The Commons is a conceptual framework for a digital environment to allow efficient storage, manipulation, and sharing of research objects. And the elements which are listed and are currently under discussion is a largely cloud-based compute platform, containers for packaging applications, unique IDs for research objects, open APIs for data and tools, and discoverability as a central theme, which has been already discussed many times here. And on the other hand, we have the BD2K Coordination Center, where the aim is to ensure sustained impact of the results from the 11 centers plus BioCaddy. One of the two focus points is administrative support. We've just discussed that, so I won't go into detail. And the second focus point is tool and knowledge directory to document and enhance dissemination of the digital products from all the participating BD2K centers of excellence. So what are the integration points between these two? What is really the expectation of NIH for the coordination center in this interaction? And I can only give one very concrete and practical example where I see how these two work well together. And that is in the discoverability aspect. I'm also choosing this because we've already seen all the components. So the coordination center in its coordinating role can probably be a strong contributor to ensuring common tagging of results from all the center of excellence, all the products of the different centers of excellence. And this could be something like what has already been mentioned earlier on for the Aztec tool index. If every product, every website from each of the COE activities just contains a few meta tags, then it's very easy to harvest in an automated way all the relevant outcome or all outcomes from the centers of excellence into an index like the Aztec index. And of course, this is only the most simple approach. That can be much more complex. We're using strategies like Google is using for giving the little summaries for tools and so on. But the role for the coordination center would probably be only to provide this is the basic rule for tagging. And then the technical harvesting is much simplified because everybody follows the same rules. And this would also fit in well as a very primitive instantiation of the interest of the Commons in defining open APIs. We've heard another example of this from Chun-Lei at the beginning of this day, where he mentioned that a strong role for the Commons is as a repository of APIs, not only of tools and data. So this is clearly another contact point. And this then, once the harvest has happened, of course, the role of Aztec or also of the DDI is to support the discoverability of tools, data, APIs, all kinds of relevant digital objects. And so these are, on this example, or this is, I think, a good example where the coordination center provides basic rules which are recommended for all the centers of excellence to label, tag their products, to follow certain guidelines. Then probably the coordination center has a role in harvesting the results, presenting common results across many of the centers of excellence, and then integrating this into the larger Commons framework. So this is really how I see the possible and relevant interaction between the coordination center and the Commons. But I would really like to, and this is the last slide, I would really like to hand over the question to the NIH officers. I had a chance to warn Ian. Unfortunately, I couldn't talk to the others, so I hope I don't put you on the spot. But also for everybody else in the room to provide opinions on how this interaction could and should really take place between the Commons and the Coordination Center.
So thanks for the slide, Henning. You're making me homesick, having spent a week in the California desert seeing cattle in idyllic English countryside.
We do have enough rain, unlike California. Yes.
But I think it does. I mean, that's what I'm familiar too with as far as the Commons goes, and I did my research on Wikipedia as to what a Commons is, and it is around this area of common ownership. And I think one of the things that you should all remember is this thing is getting labelled as the NIH Commons. Well, NIH is only one of the participants in this, and the Commons is really the collective thing that everybody brings together and makes available to everyone else for free. And I think that concept, as you say, is definitely there in the sense of what Phil is bringing to this. And I think one thing, change that we're going through is the BD2K was conceived of before the office of the Associate Director for Data Science was in place. And certainly one of the things, so I'm the science officer on the BioCaddy project, and one of the changes that's been going on with that is really having BioCaddy focus very much on the commons, which was a difficult thing to do a few months ago because the commons was not well articulated as to what it is. It's becoming better articulated. But I think the focus that we have there, the developing focus in BioCaddy on the commons, and it's yet to fully emerge, but I think that it's going to be an important focus for the coordination center as well. And you've highlighted two particular areas, but I think it's also going to apply in the areas of IDs, for example. I mean, around the discussion we just had around IDs. And the other thing that was emerging for me as you were talking is we've got this huge community that's got sort of, well, right, the image that frequently gets used on this is the blind man and the elephant, each feeling a different part of the elephant, describing it differently. I mean, I think we've got a huge community and everyone has got some bit of the story. And I think there's probably going to be a role for the coordination center in helping everybody get on the same page with the story in, maybe focused on these particular areas. Well, what is the story about IDs as far as the commons? But I think as the commons emerges, and we will see over the next months, the commons emerge into something real in terms of a pilot, where there will be things which are going to need IDs, and we'll need something in place, and we'll need answers. And I think that the coordination center, I don't know if Vivian is on the phone, I emailed her. But no, I think the coordination center will have a central role. And I guess what I said to Lucilla about BioCaddy and the commons, actually I'm not sure I did say it to Lucilla yet, but in a way, the BioCaddy did a white paper towards the end of this year and was given the direction about the commons and to focus on the commons as a priority. But I referred to that as an Easter egg, effectively, because it wasn't well defined, but it's becoming better defined, and I think it's probably the case for the coordination center as well, is everybody's got to stay on the balls of their feet as this thing evolves. Which is fun, right?
That's why I focus on what is concrete, so there will be something about discovery.
We don't want to come into work every day and do the same routine thing.
Yeah.
Certainly can echo that, and as you suggested, not only the unique ID identifiers, which I think is a key concept for coordination center and working groups, but also when you look at Aztec and the idea of containers such as Docker, you're already formulating ideas for workflow, and those can be constructed as containers. And if you make them such that they're in sync with what's being developed with the commons, I think that would be a very good way to produce synergy with these efforts. And in terms of the computing platform, as long as your back-end databases like MongoDB, what you're using are similar to what other folks like BioCaddy are using, or what's going to emerge in the commons, I think that would be helpful. I want to say, though, that although we're focusing on the cloud for the commons platform, it is supposedly infrastructure agnostic, so I think Vivian has ideas that it will go to other infrastructures, high-performance computing perhaps, or novel grid or cluster computing. I think that that's one thing that she does want to make sure that it is agnostic to the computing platform. But you're off to a really good start in terms of identifying key components that could be leveraged for the soon-to-be pilot commons.
I'm still trying to crystallize my thoughts, but I'll just kind of go with the flow here. So, as I think Ian pointed out, the the discussion we had around IDs is really important in terms of what is the governance behind unique IDs for constantly, evolving software. I think we're kind of struggling with that as how to kind of encourage people on what to get and how to keep track of that. So I think that's definitely a good thing. But what the thought that occurred to me is as these occur, how do we capture these thoughts kind of in an informal way? And I like an informal approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have people informally blog about it or just capture this again through those online forums and have everybody not only within the centers of excellence but even beyond in the community to prioritize on those so that way we kind of know what kind of bubbles up to the top to see what needs to be addressed in terms of the synergies between commons. And I think that's a good role that the coordinating center can play as well. So.
There was one aspect where I was saying I maybe meant to develop and didn't fully develop, is the idea of I'll attach a word to it. I think I was essentially describing, people that all have their point of view or perspective from wherever they're standing about what the commons is. And the coordinating center, helping establish some common ground on that. The phrase I would add to that is maybe the coordinating center becomes a knowledge center, effectively.
Yeah, that's good.
So basically from administrative support to really knowledge integration, knowledge collection. Across
knowledge here being, being the go-to place if you want to know about the commons, about BD2K.
Okay, that's...
And that brings with it, from prior experience with different projects, a whole pattern of things that a centre might do, some of which I think you're already onto in terms of talking about the collaboration tools that you might use, forums, have discussion forums where people can answer one another's questions and you sort of maybe crowdsource the knowledge about.
So I think that's definitely something that would be good to do just to aid the dissemination of information as these ideas crystallize. And as all of you alluded to, right, this vision is crystallizing a little bit. I mean, are there any key elements, for those of us who haven't heard, an official presentation on the Commons in the last, 8 months, 12 months, are there any, real important concepts that need to be summarized for the broader audience here?
Well, I mean, there was a presentation on what the Commons is at the kickoff meeting, I think in November, and I think there's maybe that presentation has been developing over time. So I was sort of thinking, can I get onto the web and find out where that latest version is of that, and the place that I went to, the BD2K site, and there is the page on the Commons. There is more information than is currently shown on that page from those presentations, and I think it would be good if we could unearth the latest version of that PowerPoint to the extent that it helps. But this is going to have I think all I can say, a quantum leap in how far it's described in terms of the Commons pilot in the next few months. But that is being put in place with various vendors, and until that is put in place, there are certain things that can't be described about it, is my understanding. But we'll certainly do what we can to get a more detailed set of those slides. I'm sure they have been distributed previously from those different meetings. I don't know where their resting place is right now, but we can find that out.
I've definitely noticed that the site itself, the Commons documentation site, has changed over the last couple of weeks, so that's probably also a place to. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the presentation.
I've been tasked to give you an update on our plans with respect to hackathons as part of the Coordination Center. I'm going to start with just a very brief sort of historical context, and I'm going to keep it brief because many of you were at the PI meeting in February where Ben actually gave a presentation on our history here, and so I'm just going to briefly recap that. So at the time Ben presented, we had done 2 hackathons, and we had another one since then in May, and so at this point we've done 3 hackathons, co-sponsored with some great partners at Stanford, formerly with the NCBO, now with CEDAR, and also with folks at UCSD, originally with NIF and now with BioCaddy. And all of these have turned out to be what we've considered to be successful events for a variety of different reasons. But I think it is important to sort of be explicit about why we were enthusiastic about hackathons and to set realistic expectations in terms of what we expect to get out of hackathons. Hackathons at their core, right, are where we bring together, I don't know, a few dozen people, we get together with a broad background, broad expertise, and sort of at this event, you know, create pilot projects that mix and match different skill sets and interests. And so in that regard, we have found them to be great for social networking and putting together pilot projects and proof of concepts. And Chun-Li presented one success story right out of the first hackathon in this series came out myvariant.info, but it shouldn't be glossed over that coming into that hackathon event, it was building on expertise that Chun-Li had built, building mygene.info, building on expertise that Sean Mooney had in all of his human genetic studies. So there's upfront work, and then also there was downstream work, actually crystallizing that together and putting it into a specific proposal that was ultimately successful as one of these BD2K UL1 awards. So, right, so we really view hackathons as a great way to bring people together with diverse skills, expertise to do these prototypes. So our Heart BD2K Center will continue to do hackathons as we proposed, and these will be around themes that are of interest to our center. Cardiovascular health, big data, proteomics, so on, so crowdsourcing, citizen science, so forth. In addition, our goal as part of the coordinating center is then to facilitate other groups within the BD2K community to run hackathons of their own. And similar to how Alex described the working groups, our goal is not to be prescriptive in this manner. Our goal is not to define hackathons at different sites across the country, but rather to let those bubble up from the community. So the way we structured this is actually to put together a funding announcement where we want to help other people host hackathons, both logistically and financially. The idea would be to encourage other BD2K awardees to propose hackathons of their own, and in a pretty simple application. You know, some key components shown at the bottom here, describing you know, logistical details, a description of the target audience, what the relevance is to the NIH BD2K program, a plan to promote both attendance and diversity among data science and participants, and then some sort of scientific theme. And then based on these applications, we would award up to six awards at a financial support of $3,000 per year. And in exchange, of course, for a recap or a report from each one of those events. And those reports, we hope, will come together to build sort of the critical mass of knowledge of what makes a successful hackathon, and sort of building on our community knowledge there. Just to enumerate some possible hackathon themes, of course, this is again is the themes are as broad as BD2K is broad, but everything from data integration and data analysis challenges of biomedical big data, crowdsourcing and text mining tools, data standardization, access, query, things like that, data sharing, data software tools, and then also training and reuse of biomedical big data. So these, I think, are all within scope of what we hope to receive applications for. We're proposing a small committee to help evaluate and evaluate these applications. Tentatively, pending sort of administrative review, a representative from the NIH BD2K program staff, and then a rotating members from a rotating selection of 3 of the BD2K centers of excellence, the 3 that we propose to start with are shown there. 2 members from the other BD2K project awards from the other funding programs, and then members from the coordinating center itself. We're proposing to have 2 different deadlines per year. So just to divide it, so 3 awardees planned for each funding deadline. Given the dates, and since we're a little bit slow in this first year getting this out, we're going to move that August 30th deadline to a September 30th deadline just in this first year only. That's pretty much our plan with respect to hackathons as part of the Coordination Center. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Andrew. I was pleased to see in your list of bulleted list of different kinds of hackathon, the last one there, which was almost more focused around users, I think, rather than, because typically if you think about hackathon, at least I think people looking at a blinking cursor and knowing what to do once they're there, whereas we've encountered with this question of search and indexing, well, do people know how to use the tools that are there already? What can you do with Google to go and find data sets, for example? And just having a session where, rather than coding, you might almost call it a user-thon rather than a hackathon. So I was going to ask, before I saw this slide, whether you were thinking of that kind of area, but I think perhaps it's covered in that last area. I mean, not just training, but the exposure to and using hands-on, maybe with side by side with someone who knows how to do it.
Great idea, and I think that's a point that we can make even more explicit in the RFA itself. I started with the idea that hackathons are great for building bridges, building the personal connections, and that's within the BD2K program, but also external as well. External with other developers and external with other users, as you're alluding to. And one formulation that I've heard of this happening is this concept of bring your own data, right? And so it's people who have data needs coming with their data and intermixing with people who build the tools or have analysis capabilities. And that, I think, would be another formulation of a hackathon proposal that I think would be quite fantastic.
I know you've been thinking about the diversity of attendees at hackathons as well, and extending that scope might mean you might get a less, well, I don't know, a more diverse audience.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. And I will say that, that trying to get biologically oriented people, right, rather than blinking cursor people like myself, I mean, to participate has always been something we've been open to in our previous hackathons, I mean, I think we explicitly state that. But yet drawing those people in has been a challenge, right? And this is the type of thing where instead of just doing 2 shots on goal every year, if we are doing, 6 shots on goal and accumulating that knowledge and being able to share what works, what doesn't, that's our hope for being able to make these events more and more successful in that regard.
In fact, just to add to what Ian was saying, Ian and I were both at the Bioinformatics Open Source conference last month, and that's definitely an emerging theme in terms of users bringing data and more biologists attending, working with the tool developers. And an anecdotal thing to share as well, that they've made the conscious decision to rename hackathons to CodeFest to have a more positive connotation.
Good point. All right. Excellent. I mean, and I will say that, within our small little center, yes, it happens to be that my group happens to have the most expertise in terms of running hackathons. But if there are particular groups, right, we definitely want to reach those bridges at these planning stages of other people who have run successful events. So I know there's one at Johns Hopkins that's happening. I think they're calling it a data hackathon or something like that next month. And so finding similar initiatives that are currently happening or have happened in the past, if there are any people who fit that bill who you can put us in touch with, that would be very welcome. Thanks.